Once upon a time, there was something called the Xer. It taught me that I'm not scared of monsters, the ones that roar or ghosts that make spooky sounds. Nope, what really scares us all is the unknown. It's the creepy feeling in the dark, the chilly touch on your back when you're alone, or the quick thing you see out of the corner of your eye. It's the thing you imagine is right behind you, ready to scare you when you notice it. The scariest part is that we don't know what it looks like, and that's what makes it unknown. We give scary things faces to make them real and less frightening, but there's one thing that stays invisible and faceless. That scary feeling comes from our own imaginations. But sometimes, in really scary situations, that fear comes from something else. I can't even describe the creature I saw, and I don't want to. Just seeing it made my mind go crazy, and I had to look away to keep my sanity. The sight of it even made me throw up. I think there's some kind of spooky energy around it because being near it made me feel tense and terrified. I remember a little bit of what it looked like, but thinking about that awful night still makes me feel sick. It was a nice October evening when my friend Gavin called. I was enjoying the cool weather on my porch, reading a mystery book. The sun was setting, and everything was peaceful until the loud phone rang inside my house. I knew it was the phone and rushed inside to answer it. I was happy to see it was Gavin, a friend I hadn't talked to in a while. Gavin, a professor and archaeologist, had recently come back from a big excavation. Before leaving, he called me all excited about this amazing opportunity. He was working on digging up a town from the 1800s that got buried in an earthquake and avalanche. A rich person had asked him to lead the archaeology team, and Gavin was thrilled. The benefactor gave Gavin lots of details about the dig site, and Gavin couldn't believe his luck. I wished him good luck before he left, thinking I wouldn't hear from him for a long time, maybe 6 months. Digging up a whole town sounded like a big job. But now, just 3 months later, Gavin was calling me. I answered the phone and said hello, feeling a bit unsure of why he was calling. Hello? Gavin? Devin? Gavin sounded really excited, but I could sense something else in his voice. Was he nervous? Why are you back so soon? Did the digging in that old town finish early? You could say that, Gavin replied. Look, I need you to come over to my house. The sun is setting. It's almost night. Devin, this is important, Gavin said. I wouldn't ask unless it was. I found something in the town. I just need someone here. Do you have it with you? Yes, Gavin slowly answered, his voice shaking. It's a huge discovery. Something impossible. Just get over here, all right? I can tell you everything when you get here. Not over the phone. Gavin, are you Dash? I tried to ask, but I heard the phone click as he hung up. Okay? Even though Gavin's behavior seemed strange, he was still my friend. With a little bit of worry about what might happen tonight, I got into my car and drove to Gavin's house in the forest. Gavin Thomas lived in a simple 2-story home on the edge of Marwin Heights, our hometown. He used to teach at the local college until his archaeology work made him take a break. His house wasn't too far from the college. When I pulled into his driveway, I saw him waiting on the porch. Every light in his house was on, making it stand out in the dark forest. Tall trees cast spooky shadows on his messy lawn, and for some reason, I felt a bit scared. The sun was still setting, but the sky had been bright red and orange before I entered the woods. Once I was among the dense trees, it felt like I had stepped into a really dark night. Devin! Good to see you again. Gavin greeted me warmly as I got out of my car. As I walked over, he stood up from his chair on the porch, and we hugged. Gavin was my best friend from childhood and still is. You looked worried on the phone, I said, looking at him with concern after our hug. What did you find during the dig? Hurry, inside. He motioned towards the front door, glancing around the trees with worried eyes, as if searching for something. I was getting more and more uneasy about his actions, but I followed him inside. He quickly locked the door behind us, and we went to his den, sitting on the couch. In front of us was a coffee table with an old leather bag on it. "So, about the dig," I said, trying to break the silence. Right. Gavin took a deep breath. "We were digging up a city called Nightshale. It was a big city in the 1800s, but became kind of forgotten. We found it buried under lots of rocks and dirt because of an earthquake." "An earthquake?" I asked. "Nightshale was by the Midas River, at the bottom of a mountain," Gavin explained. "One day, the ground shook, and a big gap opened up under the town. What was left of Nightshale got buried or wrecked when an avalanche came down from the mountain, covering the town and everyone in it." "That's really sad," I said, finding it hard to believe. "But it sounds like a huge job. Some people take weeks to dig up a dinosaur fossil, and your team uncovered a whole town in just 3 months?" No, Gavin waved his hand. "We only dug up a tiny bit of the town, but we made good progress in those short months." "Why did the dig end so early? Why are you back so soon?" I asked. "It's a long story, Devin," Gavin grinned, but it seemed forced. Looking back, he looked really scared, but I didn't see it then. Maybe I didn't want to. Gavin leaned forward, grabbing a satchel. Taking it, he sat back against the couch and reached inside. He pulled out a shiny red jewel, small enough to fit in his hand. "Wow," my eyes widened. "How did you get that?" "This is the Nightshale strange gem," Gavin explained, looking more at the gem than at me. "I shouldn't have it. I think I'm in danger because I do." "What do you mean? What kind of danger?" Gavin gently placed the gem on the table, where it glowed brightly. Then, he grabbed a leather notebook from the bag. "These are my notes, my journal," he said. "Everything from the dig is right here." Gavin stopped, his face turning white, and his eyes widened as he stared past me. I turned around just in time to see something big move out of view from the window. I jumped up, and Gavin started trembling. "He's here," Gavin whispered, his voice shaking. "What?" I asked, trying to leave the room, but Gavin grabbed my shoulders. "Devin, he shouted. "Just wait here, okay? I'll go take care of it. I'll be back in a minute." "What was that? Is someone outside the house?" I shouted. "Gavin, what's happening?" "Everything's fine," Gavin said as he rushed out of the room. "Don't follow me, Devin. Just wait here. It'll be okay, I promise." I heard Gavin running around the house, searching for something. Then, I turned back to the gem and the journal. I didn't like it, but I knew Gavin wasn't telling me everything. Something was in those journals. I sat back down and listened for Gavin to come back. When I was sure he wasn't returning, I picked up the leather notebook and started reading Gavin's notes. I heard the front door open, and Gavin hurried outside, but I stayed put. It was time to find out what really happened during the Nightshale excavation, even if Gavin wouldn't tell me himself. From Professor Gavin Thomas's journal. August 19th, 1988. Today, I got to the excavation site. Digging up this town will be hard and expensive, but our benefactor is helping a lot. He says Nightshale was amazing hundreds of years ago, and I believe him from what I've seen. Nightshale was a big city in the 1800s, by the gentle Midas River, near a mountain. An earthquake split the ground, and an avalanche buried Nightshale under tons of mud and rocks. The city was forgotten, so I don't know how our benefactor knows about it. Still, we might find cool stuff if the dig goes well. The area is now surrounded by a forest, and I wonder if these trees are from the old forest near Nightshale before the earthquake. When I arrived, the dig had already started. Many buildings had fallen, but some stood tall. The team, mostly diggers and excavators, and a few archaeologists like me, found a big structure they think is the Honeycomb Mansion. The Honeycomb family was important to Night Shale, and their mansion might still be there. They helped make the city great, and stories of their kindness brought people from all over to live here. The fact that the mansion might still be standing shows how strong Night Shale once was. We've been working hard at the Honeycomb Mansion, trying to uncover more. Our benefactor's money is helping a lot, so we might keep digging for months, maybe even a year. He just wants us to find something special. I'm sure we'll find it if the mansion hasn't been completely ruined. We've made some progress, but we're mainly focused on the Honeycomb Mansion. We found a body in the area where the old Midas River used to be. Now, it's just a dry trench in the sandy ground. There wasn't much left, just a few bones and torn clothes. The person must have drowned in the river before the disaster. It's not a bad discovery, and it's boosting our spirits. The mansion is huge, with 2 stories, and I'm sure there are valuable things inside. I'm starting to wonder if our benefactor is only interested in money. Tomorrow, we're planning to get into the mansion through an upstairs window. It'll be risky, but the reward could be huge. Who knows what treasures are hidden in there? Tonight, I'm going to bed early. I've been feeling paranoid, like something is watching us dig. It's probably just my overactive imagination, but the forest around us does feel spooky. I've decided to stay away from it and told the others to do the same. Guess what? We finally got into the Honeycomb Mansion. I was so excited when we went inside. The avalanche broke some windows, so we had to clean up the dirt that got in. Surprisingly, there wasn't much dirt. Maybe the windows held up well, or the rocks from the avalanche stopped a lot of it. We started thinking the damage wasn't too bad, but then we found a big part of the mansion had caved in. So much for luck. The inside of the mansion is amazing, like the 18th century. Colorful paintings cover the walls, and there are fancy rugs in a long hallway. I'm not sure how many rooms there are. It looks like the Honeycombs not only built up Night Shale but also decorated their mansion a lot. Most of the fancier stuff seems to be from Bella Honeycomb. Bella was a not-so-nice lady who married into the Honeycomb family. She got all their money when her husband and other family members died from an illness. She got greedy and used the money on herself instead of helping Night Shale. From my research, Bella died mysteriously a few months before the avalanche. I wonder what happened. Today, we didn't find anything. We got spooked being in a buried house without support beams, so we couldn't check everything thoroughly. But we saw every intact room. I still have goosebumps from exploring, and I can't wait to do it again tomorrow. Some rooms got destroyed by the avalanche, but we'll dig them out when the support beams are in place, and hopefully, we won't end up burying ourselves. We've been exploring the mansion for a few days, and it's way bigger than I thought. We've only cleaned 3 rooms so far. I checked everything that might be valuable, but we haven't found anything important. Just some vases and paintings from the 19th century, which are okay but not as exciting as our benefactor made it sound. He talked like we're searching for something huge, something that could change archaeology. Today, a digger named Henry scared everyone. He was by the river and started shouting about seeing something in the forest. Nobody else saw it. Older diggers went into the trees to look for an animal, but they came back saying they found nothing. Henry swears he saw something and asked me to move him away from the forest. It's tough since the forest is all around us. Maybe I can move him to the mansion if he can handle it. Now everyone is on edge, worrying about animals in the forest. I can't let irrational fears distract me. People are just letting their imaginations run wild. But before that, still no exciting news. We've been going through the mansion, and it feels like it goes on forever. We cleared 3 more rooms, but all I found was a cool amulet on a falling apart shelf. I thought we'd find more quickly, but Night Shale isn't as amazing as everyone said. we started digging around the mansion to see how much got damaged. Thankfully, it's not too bad. Only a few rooms were wrecked when part of the roof fell, and a few more got buried. It could have been way worse. August 31st, 1988. Some bad news. Workers were clearing dirt, and a room collapsed. Luckily, they heard a creaking sound and got out in time. 2 diggers got hit by debris, and another got stuck in the rocks. He was screaming, and we had to call a helicopter to lift him out. The benefactor called, saying the injury was a mistake and hopes it won't slow us down. It seems like he only cares about money or whatever he wants from what we find. Henry, the digger who said he saw something in the forest, has been quiet for days, which is good. People here are starting to relax, but I can't be sure. I'm still having trouble sleeping, and I hate to admit it, but Henry's story got to me too. I'm getting more paranoid, and I almost believe he saw something in the woods, but not an animal. I'm probably just being silly. The accident today must have stressed me more than I thought. We found a room that had rocks fall on it, like it caved in. As we were clearing it out, we saw a body on the bed under the rocks and dirt. It was clear they died when a rock hit their head. They were just bones with ragged clothes, and it seemed like they knew they were going to die because they held a small metal chest tightly in their hands. It looked like they wanted someone to find it. The chest was really small, and I could hold it in one hand. We gently took it from the skeleton's grasp, and I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of old paper. It felt fragile, like it would fall apart with a little touch. I unfolded it, and there was a poem written in faded ink. Fear the Xer. Run, my child, run to a safe place quickly. Don't stay here, leave before it comes. It will arrive, growling in the never-ending night. Anyone who looks at it will surely die. It breaks the darkness with a rage-filled cry. Then it starts coming, eager to play. Hide in your empty house, don't go outside. When the beast comes, it's best to pray. With dark eyes and a sharp mouth. Fear the dreadful Xer, my child. Or you'll end up as its victim. It goes back into the woods afterward. Don't try to chase it as it returns. Because now, behind you, its mouth opens wide. Looking at him, the temptation burns. He has eyes of forgetfulness. As madness takes over, you start to scream. Now those eyes glow, his mouth opens wide. Your mind falls apart at the seams. Fear the dreadful Xer, my child. I keep reading the poem over and over, trying to find something I missed. It feels like I know it by heart now. I don't know why, but I think it means something important. And this mysterious key is still confusing me. There was another injury today. A digger by the Midas River got scared and panicked about something he saw. We think it might have been a hallucination because he was the only one who saw it. The man screamed, dropped his shovel, and tried to run away from imaginary monsters. He didn't notice the edge of the quarry around the honeycomb mansion until it was too late. He fell in headfirst, rolled down the slope, got some bad cuts from the rocks, and landed on his arm, breaking it. It was not a good day. Today, I checked the room where we found the poem and the key again. I searched everywhere, in the bookshelves, under the bed, and in the drawers. I even looked at the skeleton to make sure we didn't miss anything. Another room collapsed today, but luckily, no one was inside. I keep thinking if whatever the key unlocks was in that room. I have to stop myself from only thinking about the key. September 9th, 1988. It's all pointless. We've been through almost every room in that mansion, and I still can't find what the key unlocks. Henry keeps telling stories about the silly forest, and I'm thinking about kicking him off the dig. We don't need everyone getting worked up over nothing. I've been feeling angsty lately, probably because of not getting enough sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night and don't know why. Last night, I got out of my cot, left the tent, and was halfway to the honeycomb mansion before I realized what I was doing. I need to find what this key unlocks. Every day that goes by is another day struggling for answers. September 5th, 1988. I keep reading the poem over and over, trying to find something I missed. It feels like I know it by heart now. I don't know why, but I think it means something important. And this mysterious key is still confusing me. There was another injury today. A digger by the Midas River got scared and panicked about something he saw. We think it might have been a hallucination because he was the only one who saw it. The man screamed, dropped his shovel, and tried to run away from imaginary monsters. He didn't notice the edge of the quarry around the honeycomb mansion until it was too late. He fell in headfirst, rolled down the slope, got some bad cuts from the rocks, and landed on his arm, breaking it. It was not a good day. I finally found out what the key unlocks, and it's the most amazing discovery ever. This will make my career and be the star of a museum. It's the only good thing that comes from the cursed city of Nightshale. We were searching a room today, like a trophy room with faces and paintings. One man pulled a painting off the wall, and behind it, there was a hidden compartment. It was a small space with a metal chest, just like the one we found with the skeleton. I took out the key from my pocket and tried it on the chest, and it opened. Inside, there was velvet, and a beautiful red gem neatly sitting at the bottom. I closed the chest and took it back to camp for a closer look. I found a really strange gem today. It's round and smooth on one side, but sharp and jagged on the other, like it was torn from a bigger jewel. It's red and sparkly, and when I looked through it, I thought I saw something moving inside. But then, it seemed like the gem pulsed, and I dropped it. Maybe I imagined it, but it felt alive. I put the gem and the Exer poem in a little bag and keep it with me all the time. Today, there was another cave-in at the mansion. I think we should focus on the old museum in Nightshale instead. It was a great place in the past, and I should have started there. I told our benefactor about the gem, and he seemed excited. He wants me to bring it when I meet him at the end of the month. I'm curious to hear what he thinks about it. I can't sleep well lately, and I'm getting annoyed with everyone. It might be because of the dig. Henry went for a walk in the woods and hasn't come back. I find it strange, so I'll go look for him with some others before nightfall. Something terrible happened. We went looking for Henry in the woods, and we found his body. It was awful. He had deep cuts on his chest and stomach, and his eyes and mouth were torn open. A fly even crawled out of his mouth. It was too violent for an animal, but I'm trying to believe it was a bear. The excavation is over. Everyone is leaving because we're tired, scared, and in danger. This dig that was supposed to make my career has ended in a horrible way. Nightshale will be left undisturbed. September 21st, 1988. I stayed up all night as everyone left the site. I packed my things and got on the last helicopter. I heard a cave-in echo from the mansion as I left for the last time. I still have a meeting with our benefactor on the 30th, and I know he'll want to report on the Nightshale incident. These journal entries will help. I didn't realize the Nightshale strange gem was in my trunk until the helicopter was far from the site. I had a meeting with the benefactor, Mr. S, tonight. I went to his house, and he welcomed me inside. It was stormy outside, so I was glad to be out of the rain. His house wasn't as big as the Honeycomb Mansion, but I was more interested in Mr. S himself. We hadn't met in person before, and I expected an older man. However, the person who brought me in was fairly young, wearing a black hoodie with the hood up, as if he wanted to hide his face. It was not what I had imagined. We sat in chairs across from each other in his living room with a table between us. "First things first, Professor Thomas," he said. "Let's see the Nightshale strange gem, as you call it." I gave him the satchel, and he opened it, letting the gem and the folded paper fall onto the table. He smiled at both of them. "This was a tough find, Mr. S," I told him as he gently picked up the gem to take a closer look. The honeycombs kept it locked in a hidden chest. "I must congratulate you for finding it," he praised, looking at the paper. "What's this?" "We found the key to the gem in another chest," I explained. "This paper was with the key. It's a poem about something called the Exer. Have you ever heard of anything like that?" He sighed. "The Exer was just a nightshade legend before the avalanche. I don't remember the details, just a story about a monster." "Looks like you found some writer's work." "And the strange gem?" "Again, this was a great find," Mr. S said, still looking at the gem. "Look closely into its shiny red part, and they say you can see fire dancing." "Fire!" That must have been the movement I saw in the gem. I paid more attention as Mr. S stood up, moved his chair aside, and walked to a big window to watch the storm. "Indeed I have, Professor Thomas," he replied, still looking out the window as the rain slid down the glass. Nightshide's end was a sad event in history, but this gem has special powers. "Powers?" I asked, feeling a knot of fear in my stomach. Had he noticed the strange pulse of the gem? Was the gem what he wanted all along? "The people of Nightshade couldn't use the gem's powers," Mr. S said through clenched teeth, "but I can. I can use them." "What kind of powers?" I leaned forward, curious. "I might have said too much already, Professor Thomas, and I don't want to bore you with wild stories." Mr. S shook his head, still staring out the window. "Your check is in the envelope marked Gavin Thomas on the counter. Leave the gem. Pick up the check on the way out." I slowly got up from my chair, looking back at Mr. S, the benefactor of our crazy dig, who refused to look at me. I knew I had to make a choice at this moment, and I wasn't comfortable with that choice. Quietly, unsurely, I rose and looked back at Mr. S, who still refused to look at me. At this moment, I knew I had to make a choice, and I don't think I'm comfortable with that choice. I quietly took the gem and put it back in my pocket. Mr. S didn't turn around, and I left the envelope on the counter as I hurried out of his house. I stole the Nightshade strange gem from a man who definitely has more of a claim to it than I do. He found the city. He brought me onto the excavation in the first place. So why did I take the gem? I can't say. I was overwhelmed in the heat of the moment. I am certain that Mr. S is mad if he thinks he can use the gem for some nefarious purpose, so was it really the right choice to steal the gem? He's coming for me. I'm sure of it. Mr. S has money and influence, and I'm certain that he could make me disappear fairly easily. I need to find someone who can take these journal entries to a safe place. As for me, I need to do something with this gem. I put the papers down in shock. No archaeologist I knew ever had such an exciting excavation. At first, I thought Gavin's story was too wild to be true. I almost believed it was made up, until a loud gunshot echoed from the other side of the house. "Come on! Come on!" Gavin was yelling outside. "No, Gavin!" I cried, dropping the journal beside the strange gem on the table and leaping off the couch. I rushed through the hallway to Gavin's front door. A cool breeze filled the house from the open doorway. Gavin left the door wide open when he went out onto the porch. Only the porch light lit up the night, and I stepped outside slowly and carefully. I froze, listening for a sound, but I heard nothing except the constant sounds of nature and the trees around the house. I took another step, this time off the porch, and felt my foot kick something. I glanced down. The grass was damp and slippery with dew, but it was also stained red. The toe of my shoe had kicked what looked like the barrel of a shotgun. I followed the gun to see a hand, stiff and limp, over the trigger. My eyes moved from the hand to the arm, then to the body sprawled on its back in the grass. Gavin's lifeless eyes stared into the night sky. His lips were slightly open, and a trickle of blood dripped from the side of his mouth. His face, frozen in a terrified expression, seemed to be turning pale. I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand as my eyes widened in horror at the gruesome scene. My legs gave way, and I fell to my knees beside my deceased friend. The front of his shirt was torn, and a long, bloody slash was visible. It wasn't bleeding anymore, but whatever caused this had cleanly cut through his skin. The world seemed to pause. I couldn't even scream. I couldn't react, until I heard a snarl from behind me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my fast-beating heart. Confused thoughts filled my mind, and I covered my face with my hands, taking another deep breath. I was certain that the strange creature outside wasn't Gavin's weird benefactor, but the scariest part was that I didn't know what it was. For a moment, I wondered if it was just a wild animal, but animals couldn't turn doorknobs or bang on the door like that. But, right now, it didn't matter. Gavin had been worried about someone stealing the Nightshale's strange gem, and I struggled to think if this creature was after it. Gavin's stealing of the gem and this creature showing up couldn't be a coincidence, but from the shotgun he had, Gavin had been ready. "You went down fighting, buddy," I thought, realizing what I needed to do. I had to escape with the gem and take it somewhere hidden, but a chill ran down my spine. Thoughts of my own body outside my house crossed my mind. If I took the gem, would this creature come after me? I couldn't take any chances. Maybe I could still leave Gavin's house and somehow find the benefactor to give it to him. Anything just to get rid of it. It was silent on the other side of the door, and I carefully got to my feet. The floorboards made small creaks as I cautiously made my way across the house, through the kitchen, and into the hallway. Doors hung open to a bathroom and Gavin's bedroom, but the den was at the end of the hall. There was no door there. The lights were on in the den, which I appreciated. The whole room felt bright, a big relief after the darkness outside, as if a black fog had covered the area. The gem was still on the table next to the journals and the satchel, glistening under the lights, seemingly mocking me. I moved over to the table, picked up the satchel, and was about to put the gem and the journals back inside. However, I paused when I noticed a piece of yellowed paper stuffed in the bottom of the satchel. I examined the paper suspiciously before reaching in with 2 fingers and gently pulling it out. The paper had been folded in half, and I unfolded it to see words written in a fading black ink. Right away, I recognized it as the Excer poem that Gavin had copied in his notes. "With eye of darkness and mouth so sharp, fear the dread Excer, my child." Hadn't Gavin mentioned that Henry, the poor digger who died during the excavation, seemed to be killed by a wild animal, just like Gavin himself? I blinked a few times as something clicked inside my mind. Gavin had mentioned feeling strangely paranoid during the excavation, as if something in the forest were watching them. He had also been curious about the Excer when the poem said it went into the forest. The key to the gem had been found alongside this poem. That couldn't be a coincidence. Could the thing outside really have been the Excer? I whispered, my lips hardly parting as the words escaped me. It couldn't be real. It was only an urban legend from a long-dead city, but at the same time, it felt completely real to me. The monster that had haunted Nightshale over 100 years ago, it was back. There was no way it could be real, but there had been something impossible about the creature that had chased me. The mystery was unbearable, and I wanted answers more than anything. It was then that I realized it was too quiet, and I felt eyes on the back of my neck. Slowly, my hands shaking, I turned my head toward the window. My eyes widened, and the room began to spin as my vision blackened, making me sway. I stared at the twisted vision in the window. Out of the shadows of the night, 2 yellow orbs stared back at me while teeth-like needles twitched across a wide gash in the monster's face, as if its skin had been torn in half. I could only see its eyes and teeth, nothing else was visible behind its spasming visage that shook and twisted. After a few seconds, I turned away and vomited onto the carpet. My head felt like it was roaring, as if my skull were being split in half. The feeling faded when I looked away from the monster, but my head still ached, my hands shook, and I wiped off my mouth, trying to catch my breath. Sweat flowed from my forehead and dripped to the floor. I attempted to stop shivering, but looking at the creature had filled me with nausea and terror. When my nerves calmed a bit, I risked a look back at the window. The Xer had gone, but on the glass were 4 long scratches made by claws or a knife. I exhaled without realizing I had been holding my breath. It was gone, for now at least, but where did it go? There was no time to worry about that now. I took the satchel, put the poem, journals, and gem into it, and carried it with me as I made my way out of the den and quietly down the hallway. Passing through the kitchen toward the front door, I saw the Xer again, leering at me from the kitchen window. I dropped the satchel in shock, but all I saw were its orb-like eyes. It darted out of view as soon as I saw it. Sighing a bit to calm myself, I bent down and retrieved the satchel. Once it was in my hands, I thought about how to leave Gavin's house. I couldn't just open the door and run to my car without being caught by the Xer. I wondered if there was a way to lure it behind the house while I ran toward the front. Gavin had secured his house, but I couldn't stay in here forever. I noticed the telephone on the counter, and a rush of adrenaline hit me. Could I call someone? I picked up the phone, dialed 911, and held the receiver up to my ear, silently thanking the Lord for this miracle. There was a click, and a man's voice said, "Hello?" "Yes, hello, you have to help me," I whispered into the phone, trying not to sound like I was ranting. "I am at Gavin Thomas's house, in Marwin Heights. The address is 1915 Maple Avenue. There's some kind of creature outside. I mauled him. You need to send somebody, please, it's going to kill me." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then the man's voice spoke again. "I'm sorry, Devin, but I can't do that." I stopped breathing. I didn't move. My heart stopped. What? "The Xer is a wonderful creature, isn't it?" The man on the other end of the line sighed fondly. "So vicious. So unpredictable. Oh my God," I stammered. "Why, you're the benefactor. You're Mr. S." "I go by many names," he replied, "but, look, here's the gist of it. Gavin stole the gem, so the creature came after him. The Xer wants that gem, Devin, and it will take it. Even if it has to rip you to shreds to do so. I'm sorry that you got involved in all this unpleasantness, but that's the way it has to be now. I've taken the liberty of sabotaging the phone lines, so you won't be calling for help." "No," I whimpered. "Please, I'll give you the gem. Just call off the monster dash." He laughed. "You think I control it?" "Ha! Nobody controls that thing. You're dead. It's going to kill you, and then it's going to take the gem. Anyway, it's been nice talking with you, Devin. I'll send the police to your location tomorrow morning, after the Xer is done. Don't worry, I won't be sending anyone else to Nightshale for a very long time. Oh, and one last thing, you've probably figured this out already, but don't look at the Xer. It doesn't like that." With that, the benefactor hung up, and the dial tone hummed in my ear as I stood, paralyzed with astonishment and complete horror. I gently hung up the phone and stood, leaning against the counter, for what felt like hours, just staring at the wall. Was there nothing I could do now to avoid my fate? I was snapped out of my dread-filled trance by the sound of glass shattering, and then that familiar, yet haunting roar resonated from the den. Even as I broke away from the counter, satchel in hand as I ran toward the den where the sound had come from, I knew in my stomach that the Xer had broken the window while the benefactor had distracted me. It was inside. I had barely gotten into the den when a blur slammed into me, knocking me to the ground as it snatched the leather satchel from my hands. I cried out as the wind was knocked out of me, and lay on the ground wheezing. The sound of papers tearing echoed through the room as the Xer ripped the satchel open and tore the journal apart, sending the pages raining through the room. The poem fell to the ground in front of my face, and I looked up in time to see the Xer holding the bright red strange gem in one gnarled hand, or was it a claw, or tentacle? The pain in my head returned as I stared at the Xer, unable to pull away my gaze, and I let out a scream as I felt my brain pulsing. For a moment, I swear that I could see a small, golden fire rise up from the gem. A face made of fire seemed to rise from the flames, accompanied by a hissing sound that resembled windy laughter. The Xer seemed to contemplate this gem for a moment, and then it crushed it. My eyes rolled up into my head, and I blacked out, finally succumbing to the trauma the Xer's appearance had on my mentality. I fought to remain conscious, listening to the sounds of the Xer pulverizing the gem into a powder. I opened my eyes a little, enough to see the remains of the gem, now dust, fall to the floor. Either I was hallucinating again, or a pink smoke rose from the gem. The Xer stood over the gem and me, and I weakly tried crawling away from it. As soon as I looked away, my strength returned, albeit slowly. I managed to get to my feet again as the Xer snarled, and then lunged at me like a wild dog, but I was already bolting. Behind me, I could hear the Xer's pounding footsteps echoing on the floor as it chased after me, determined not to leave any witnesses to its insane act. I reached the front door, silently cursing myself for locking it, and desperately unlocked it and twisted the knob. I managed to pull the door open before the Xer hit me at full speed, hurling me off my feet, over the porch, and into the grass beside Gavin's corpse. The Xer roared again, ready for its last kill, and my hands moved through the wet grass as I tried to push myself onto my hands and knees, but it was too late. The Xer threw itself at me, a blur except for those snapping needle teeth ready to rip into my throat. At the same time, my hand brushed against Gavin's gun in the grass. My fingers curled around the trigger, and I reacted without thinking. In one smooth motion, I rolled onto my back with the gun in my hands in time to see the blur of the Xer barreling toward me. I squeezed the trigger, and in an explosion of light and pus, the Xer was thrown backwards by the force of the hail of bullets fired by the shotgun. It fell to the ground and tried stumbling away, like a wounded animal, but I pumped the slide and fired again as I climbed to my feet, marching after it. This time, the monster fell to the grass. Shadows obscured its details from my vision, so I surprisingly didn't feel any pain from looking at it, so I fired one more onslaught of white-hot lead at the Xer before the gun was empty. The Xer lay in the grass and didn't move. I lost my balance and toppled onto my knees as the gun fell out of my hands. And that's when I passed out. I awoke less than an hour later, and quickly got up to see that the shotgun was right where I had left it, as was Gavin's body. I couldn't see the Xer's body in the dark, the shadows had only gotten darker as the night grew deeper, and a looming gray cloud hid the moon from view. I went back into the house, breathing in weak gasps. My head ached like someone was pressing a railroad spike into it. I limped into the kitchen, and grabbed the phone, dialing 911 again and expecting to hear the benefactor's cruel, taunting voice once more. I looked out the window as the phone rang, and from beyond the window, I heard a muffled but familiar sound. Unable to believe what I had heard, I looked out the window, mesmerized, to see two yellow orbs staring back at me. Then, as I watched, the orbs slowly moved away from the window. Without looking away from me, they drew further and further away before finally disappearing into the night. I stood there, stunned, with the phone still up to my ear. "Hello, 911, what's your emergency?" a woman's voice asked from the other end of the line. "Is anyone there? Are you hurt? Hello?"